So thanks for joining me and this great group of panelists around the consortium. Unlike most panels, I think I'm going to start this with a little bit of background from a very subjective point of view, which is my own point of view. And I'll get into what the advertising consortium is for us, how I think it came about, and where we're going from here. But for me, it all started back in 2014. Back then, I worked at a little company called Google, and we had pretty decent data assets. Everyone knows this about Google. But when you think of Google, you usually think of behavioral and predictive assets. What myself and my two co-founders found was that we actually thought that the most important assets that they had were the graph. The graph is the thing that ties all of the different signals to each other. And for us, that graph was the thing that we thought we needed to bring to the rest of the market, to the open internet. So we set about building a company called Arbor, and the expressed goal of Arbor was to democratize the graph. So we first looked into what is the graph. The graph is two things. One, it's a relatively stable identifier for a device. Two, it's the ability to connect across devices. So to do that, we needed to figure out who has that type of data. Turns out that marketers and publishers have those data sets. Publishers through logins, and marketers, since they have a direct customer relationship, they can really understand the user very well. So we built a platform that helps publishers and marketers manage and monetize their data sets. That quickly scaled to about 50% of the US. And it turned out at that point, we figured out that LiveRamp had an even better graph and a better data set. They acquired us and another company called Circulate back in 2016. And here we are today. We added that data set to the graph, and we quickly saw about a 50% increase in scale domestically. What we didn't yet have was 100% scale or international presence, really. It's difficult to take this method and build out an international presence. So we looked around and looked at some other like-minded companies that had similar goals. And in May of last year, we announced on the stage at the AppNexus Summit that we were going to form something called the Consortium, the Advertising ID Consortium. And so we've been building that out now. The goal of that is to have a whole bunch of players from around the industry come together that all have different types of data sets, be able to put them together, and then get increased combined scale to be able to provide as much value as the giants. And that's really what my view of the Advertising ID Consortium is. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to my panelists to talk about, one, what they've been doing with the consortium since May of last year, and two, how everything's changed in that time period. Andrew, do you want to go first?
Thank you. Great summary, Dave. If you look at what we've done since May, I'd sort of characterize it as two parallel tracks. One of which is we've been building, looking at the core plumbing of programmatic and rethinking some of what perhaps was wrong. We can perhaps get into this a little bit more depth later, but I would say user matching and the proliferation of IDs is just absolutely wrong in every way imaginable, and that's been one key area of focus. The other thing that we've been doing is listening to the market and making changes. So from May to today, the way the consortium is operating, the way the ID works, has changed materially. The term sheet that members agree to has been modified quite a bit to address concerns that we've heard. And even the underlying technical design has evolved quite a bit. Originally, the thesis was, let's collapse this insane number of IDs, 300, 400, however many IDs from this ecosystem, down to one. On one domain. It was a great vision, but perhaps a little too aggressive for where we are today. So we've now reduced it dramatically, but instead of to one, to three. And those three domains are the AdNexus domain, adserve.org, and then a third domain, which hasn't been fully ratified, but is intended to be the neutral domain. So parallel tracks, a lot of technical thought into the core plumbing, as well as a lot of listening to everyone's concerns. And trying to really imagine this in a way that is universally palatable to as many companies as possible.
Great. So how does that work now with the third neutral domain? Will users use that by default? Will they use the AppNexus domain by default. Why do we have 3 domains? Brian, can you answer that?
No. You guys have been driving a lot of the technical design.
I could take that one too.
Okay.
Listen, the original intention for using the AppNexus domain was inertia. Tons of inertia on that domain. Made a lot of sense. A well-propagated ID. That's also true of adserver.org, another great domain by the guys at the trade desk. Also philosophically aligned, I think, with what we were trying to do. So the idea was, why reduce to just one? That can create the illusion of risk. When we can use domains with a lot of inertia already together, have them be backups to each other. The third domain, the intention for that is remove all potential allegiance to a company. So one of the other negative things that we've heard is AppNexus or I'm calling you AppNexus now. AppNexus controls this domain, so somehow there's an advantaged position. We don't agree with that, but we've definitely heard that in the market. So can we create another domain that has absolutely no allegiance to any company, so that if that's what you're comfortable with, you can still participate? I would say that is the earliest, or that is the most recent development in our journey. And we haven't landed on what that domain is, who will control it, what the governance is around it. More to come on that subject.
So to go into that, one of the initial reasons that the consortium was formed was to help cookieability on Safari. Now with the advent of ITP for Safari, that doesn't seem to be something that it can help as well anymore. So how do you think that affects marketers, and should the consortium aim to solve that problem?
I think that's more of an industry problem. I think there's a big question for Google, Apple, Microsoft, Mozilla. Like, do we want browsers to have some kind of stable ID? Why do our mobile devices have IDFAs that seem privacy safe, that consumers seem comfortable with, but we don't have that same level of persistent ID in the browser? Now, honestly, this entire domain for serving problem only exists because the browser manufacturers don't give us some kind of stable identifier. There's a lot of reasons I think that's a better design for the internet. So, why is Apple blocking the ability for cookies to operate advertising? I'm not sure, but it does make me want to say, and I hate saying this, that maybe it's time for consumers to consider Chrome on their phones so that we have at least a basically functioning internet that monetizes publisher content. And that's not just because I'm self-interested. I do think we have a major problem for journalism if we can't fund content with advertising. I don't see how Google can be anti-publishing for a considerable period of time.
Great. How does the consortium fit in with other initiatives that are happening now, such as DigiTrust? And can you use those two things together? Are they mutually exclusive?
It's not a zero-sum game at all. There's no war. I think there's also just been this perception that it's one or the other, and one of them has to win, and it's just absolutely the wrong way of looking at this. If you really want to be objective and practical for a second, it's already insane. There's hundreds of IDs that sit on pages every day that get cross-synced in order to make the magic of programmatic work. Yet billions and billions and billions of dollars go through these pipes. We could not be any more broken today than we already are. So whether it's this initiative or another initiative aiming to solve this problem, there may be n number of efforts fixated on reducing that fragmentation issue that can work lovely together in unison, and then maybe over time absolutely together too. But I wouldn't look at it as one initiative over the other or kind of at war. I think that's the wrong way to look at it, and I think a lot of people have.
So if someone's already using DigiTrust, just to be very direct, would you say there's a benefit of using the consortium?
100%.
Well, yeah, I think if I look at our decision at Numberly to actually move into the consortium, we really thought that there was such a fragmentation of data that and so many cross-industry problems that at some point you need to have cross-industry solutions for that. And as you can hear, we're originally based in Europe, and we are used to trying to build single currencies. It's been a long way. But I think that it is so critically important in smoothing out the relationships. And look, I mean, our industry needs it so bad that I agree with Andrew. I mean, if there are multiple initiatives, that's fine. I mean, the consortium is not the end of the story. It's just one part of the story. And let's gain momentum on that one and try to make it a success because the industry needs it so bad.
So what are the main types of benefits that you see for Numberly from the consortium?
So we at Numberly are in charge of helping our clients build their CRM activation and build their programmatic activation. And our key differentiator is to try to bridge that link between CRM and programmatic media. And I guess all people in this room know that the number of IDs is becoming an issue. So basically, you didn't say it at the beginning, but the consortium really comes down to two main things. One is an open ad ID to kind of standardize the identification of ads, and the other one is obviously the open identity link. So I think combining the two will smoothen out and facilitate the communication between all the ecosystems. And who can tell in this room that it is not a huge issue for the industry to lose 30% of the people each time you match it with someone else? So we need to reduce that number of identifiers, and that should increase, in fact, transparency and increase free competition, because that is one of the issues in this industry.
Great. So one of the main, I'm going to get difficult questions now, so be prepared. So one of the main concerns that I've heard aired about the consortium is that it's controlled by 3 ad tech players, right? What's to stop those 3 ad tech players from being the next walled garden? And you know, furthermore, what prevents them from not playing nice once they've amassed a ton of scale?
Thank you for the lovely question.
What does stop us?
Well, that's
We've got the mics. Let's lock the doors.
Give us your data, guys.
Come to think of it. Do you want to take this one, or I can take it?
No, please. You're Canadian. You're much better at coalition.
I could take it because I'm not part of you guys, huh? So you know, I would be glad to take it, and I appreciate the question. No, look, I mean,
I'll take it.
It's very clear.
Yeah.
As long as the consortium is open to any partner, that's a cross-industry initiative. That's something that is looking towards the future and that is trying to address cross-industry issues. So far, I can testify this has been so. And of course, we need transparency, we need a governance, but I think it's you know, after 12 months, I'm a very happy member.
I'll take that one too. I do think it's important for so many dimensions. So the first one is you have to think about this in a few different ways. Think about what, I guess take Index, for example. We're a founder, but yet we don't have a domain in this race. So if the concern is at some point the consortium disbands, and Brian has a giant ad nexus graph, and Trade Desk has a big adserver.org graph, and I guess someone takes the impartial third-party domain and creates these kingdoms, it's like, actually, that's what's already happening today. Nothing changes. That's how ad tech works right now. So I think the first thing to understand is all the concerns about this consortium are effectively occurring and playing out in real time right now with the way programmatic works, which is that we have all these little moats. There's all these little ID graphs. Some of them are big, some of them are small. The bigger ones have an advantage position over the smaller ones, and this is how our entire ecosystem works. It's absolutely crazy. And then there's these gigantic walls that really are the only ones that matter, and all of our little moats are irrelevant. So I think the first thing to understand is if you think of the negative outcome, you really just need to become objective to what we do today because it is kind of broken. The second thing to think about is giving up advantage positions. So I like to think our scale is pretty big. We have our own graph. But I can imagine that the graph of a buy plus sell platform is probably a little bigger. So if you think of it like that, there's also potentially almost like a lost advantage that this consortium brings forth too, whereby an ID graph is no longer a competitive advantage. And that's part of the underlying design here. We're not doing this to try to knight anybody or to create a competitive moat. We're actually trying to completely democratize the ID and identity so that everybody has it. And and this only works if we all do it together. So if it ever disbands, if anyone tries to pull out or play with the very, very, very strict term sheets that we have in place, you're not really going to gain anything because it all falls apart, and we'll just re-stand it up in some other way. So I think that's a really important component to think through with respect to the risk provision. I'd also say the third domain, which is really being engineered to try to address any concerns about neutrality, should also be the final nail in the coffin of that objection, because ideally no company controls it.
To that end, some publishers have pretty large amounts of data themselves, and they look at it as a competitive advantage. In this type of world, that would be a paradigm shift, right? We would no longer have a situation where that would happen. Is that the case? Do you agree with me? And what's to make a publisher comply with that and to kind of put themselves on equal footing with everyone else?
Well, I mean, we probably work with the biggest publishers in the world from that perspective. I mean, if you look at a Yahoo Japan, which has 55 million Japanese logging in every day, 2/3 of the Japanese internet population, offline assets, cell phones, credit cards, shopping, search. I mean, they're kind of where Google is here. They are there. And if you look at market by market, Microsoft's assets, anyone here have a Windows computer? Wow, very low market share. Many people in the world have Windows computers.
Just not in here.
Anyone here used
No one here.
LinkedIn?
Reliable.
LinkedIn? Jeez, man, you guys are amazing.
Right.
Everyone here is a Mac using Snapchatter. Okay, well, many audiences, you'd get a lot of hands raised. Microsoft's a large company with these assets. Anybody here have a mobile phone? Okay, I'm just checking. AT&T, who's expressed real interest in this kind of consortium. So you have some really large companies that have incredible data assets. And I think, if you listen to, any of these companies, they have a choice. Do they want to have a proprietary data set that they can use for their own behalf, or do they want to connect into a much larger opportunity, which is to actually help marketers connect the dots from their own customers' full life cycle back to purchases or other outcomes of marketing? And the truth is that it doesn't matter what data you have. It's how do marketers see the results of what they do. And that's where Numberly has extraordinary success in history. I think it's where this story really gets interesting, is if we can all speak with a single currency about a person. So I'm deeply convinced that people-based marketing is the only way we're going to really demonstrate the value of digital. It's the biggest single difference between broadcast television and digital video, if you will, or the future of our entire industry, is the idea that I can deliver an ad to a single person. In fact, to each of you, have you each respond to that ad differently, hopefully, and then to demonstrate that I can get you all to buy something or to change your purchase behavior, to change your brand of toothpaste or to buy more shoes or whatever it is. If I can't close that loop, then we're no better than where we were in the broadcast era. And for that, I need to know who you are. There's no way you're going to buy everything on your device yet, meaning you're going to walk into stores. We're going to need ways. You announced Identity Link for television yesterday, which I'm incredibly excited about because now we can bridge that gap too. So I know I'm preaching to the choir. You're all here at this conference because you believe in the promise of people-based marketing, but we have to fix the underlying friction issues. We have to get rid of this idea that every place you market is going to have a different view of that person. There's no way in a fragmented world to really achieve any kind of unified engagement strategy if you want to zoom out from a marketing perspective. So I do think that there are good questions about what the right technical architecture is, but I think we can all agree that we have to solve this problem. Very open to many different solutions as long as we very quickly get to answers that allow us to significantly scale how this business works and get to that full promise of people-based marketing.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
If I can just add something on what Brian just said, I think that it is really time to make people-based marketing not a buzzword, but really to execute, which means a certain number of things that marketers who should be on stage actually want to do. They want to be able to upload their data, they want to be able to match, they want to be able to know who was matched, they want to be able to know who was exposed at the individual level. Who was exposed is critical. They want to obviously know who reacted, and then they want to close the loop. So as long as until you reach that point, I agree with Brian, and you need to do it across platforms, otherwise we're lost. We don't have scale, and we cannot deliver up to our premises. So really, I think this is a turning point.
I do agree. It is largely about the marketer and having a common language to what matters most to them, which is their own data assets. But I just want to also throw out, because you did mention publishers and publisher data and what they'd be giving up. There's a real small nuance here, but a really important one, because I've heard that one a lot too, which is we're not going to give up the differentiation our data assets provide to our businesses. That's not what this is about at all. You have to really separate identity from differentiated data. We are not trying to pull together every publisher in the world's differentiated data and commoditize it and normalize it. This is just about identity. We want to be able to connect to the marketer's language, which is their CRM file or however they organize their own data assets, and connect that to the media. We do not really want to bring in publisher data into this consortium when it's stop at the ID and stop at identity. So a publisher isn't giving up differentiated value or positioning in the market by participating. We're not crossing that divide. We're stopping at the ID, and I think that's a really important nuance.
So we've kind of heard how publishers can benefit from this, how marketers can benefit. But what we haven't talked about at all is, does this benefit consumers, and should we be thinking about that more?
Well, I would go to the old ad tech adage, which makes probably most of the people in this room cry. It's why we get up in the morning every day, which is to put the right ad in front of the right person at the right time. They've been said a million times before. We want, I would hope, consumers want more personalized, less irrelevant advertising. There's no better way to achieve that than to be able to have a one-to-one communication with them. Identity is the key, in my view.
Yeah, and also I think you need to think also more broadly about what it is to be a consumer, not in the US. Think about it. It is an even more fragmented world. The relationship you as a consumer have with each brand is a new story each time you change platform, each time you change device, each time you change channel. So marketers know that. Marketers want to address that. We just need to give them the tools to be able to provide that value and that right, I should say, to the consumer. And the last point is, if that works out, hopefully the consumer will be able to opt out from all devices, all browsers at the same time, which would be a terrific advantage.
So to that end, that sounds a lot like something that could help for GDPR. Do you guys see the consortium as a tool to assist in that? Or is that something we should be looking at separately?
I think one thing that consumers fear and don't understand is why do so many companies drop pixels or drop code onto web pages? I think we've all seen those scary articles about this, 122 trackers in every web page. The truth is many of those aren't trackers. They're just people trying to sync cookies across domains. And I think that looks like a bigger privacy issue than it is. So if we could get rid of a lot of that, just basic ad tech plumbing, these ID syncs, it helps us actually focus in on where is data being used from a purely technical perspective. So I think that does help for GDPR purposes. I do think that dropping a pixel on a page does have data leakage implications, and so we may not be able to do that, at least at scale in Europe after May 25th. So I think there are probably aspects of this that we can streamline. I don't think that the Identity Consortium is an answer to GDPR. I think everything we've done since we started was in light of GDPR to make sure that all the technical designs and how we build this would be compatible with where Europe ends up. But honestly, I'll also mention that I don't think we can say Europe anymore in context of GDPR. It's pretty clear that different countries are going to have different interpretations, especially of e-privacy and consent. And so, it's so much more complicated even than we thought it was going to be, that, let's just solve our basic little problems, like not dropping lots of cookies on people's computers, and then we can, see if there's an angle for GDPR later. At least that's my personal opinion.
So one more question that might make you guys hate me, and then we'll move on to maybe an easier one afterwards. AppNexus and Index Exchange are two of the founding members of the consortium. What's to make any other SSP join?
Hopefully nothing. It would be great if we could just hoard ourselves into this consortium. But the truth is, I would say AppNexus probably has the largest traction of any independent company in this space. I mean, the idea behind this was, we could continue to have a systemic advantage over Index probably forever because of a deeper publisher base. Look, we can just unwind this whole thing right now. Let's do it. I mean, seriously, I know we're bigger than you are. So
I have boxing gloves.
Don't fight, guys.
For now. Yeah,
forever.
And
so the point is,
go there.
it's a strategic advantage. And if I only cared about Andrew, I would definitely not be wanting to be in a consortium with him. The problem is that Facebook and Google and Amazon and others are so much bigger than we are that I think the idea is that we all need to work together to solve these basic problems. Because in some ways, I don't think Google and Facebook have to worry about it. GDPR plays into their hands. A lot of the privacy regulations are better for first-party companies with consumer relationships. It was not the intention of Europe when they set these up, but what they really did was help Google and Facebook and hurt the rest of us. And so I guess for me, that's why it actually makes a lot more sense for all of us to work together. If this is the only thing that makes AppNexus better than Index, we're probably screwed. Good news is, there's so many things. It's really hard to list all of them right now, so we'll share this advantage with all of our partners. I'm joking.
Brian's got a great one-sheeter if anybody wants it.
Very short.
I would say that the point you're making is super valid. I would say the reason any other SSP would join is because of what Brian just said. There's no index domain in this, so we could not be more competitive. That's my answer. We don't really have a horse in the race. We're trying to do this for all the right reasons. There's no advantaged position that Index would have. If any other SSP participated, they would be on equal parity to all of us. There's no other play here. So I think we're sort of an example of the right way to look at this, which is to Brian's point. We're all kind of irrelevant to the war that really matters. There's a clash of titans that are far larger than all of us. We are not nearly on a level footing with them, and if we're at war with each other, we will remain divided, and divided we will all be conquered. So let's stop worrying about these little battles that don't matter. Your one-sheeter's amazing. We've got one too. But the point is, it doesn't matter. If we keep doing that, then we will probably lose.
Yeah.
And then just
one short comment on that. This morning there was a statistic released that showed that in Europe last year, 92% of digital advertising growth was captured by Facebook and Google. 92%. So the problem is that for many marketers in Europe and here, and obviously they're not in this room at the moment, but for many of them, they don't even know that there's an open internet somewhere. They don't know it anymore. So I think our industry really needs to react very strong, because this is an industry issue. And so we need to tell the people and marketers that yes, there exists an open internet somewhere. That digital advertising that we were so proud to build over the past 10 years, I mean, is something else than just giving away giving your money to one of these, duopolies members. And I think this is critical now. So we need marketers in this room to actually vote with their feet and actually invest where they can measure. Because I believe that a marketer should be entitled to understand the data They should be entitled to hold their data, to own them, to build their graph, to measure, to test, to make mistakes. I mean, this is the job. This is why you guys, did marketing. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be like this. I mean, our industry has always been innovating and pushing for disruption. If we agree with those figures, these 92%, I mean, let's do something else.
I would just say, just maybe be a little contrarian, like, I don't think that there's ever going to be a marketer who's going to give a handout to ad tech or any of us. So if we cannot find a way to be as good, we will lose it all. It'll be 100% soon. The point being, we can't just act as, this inferior alternative that people reward with a small percentage of their budget so that the illusion of a marketplace exists. We have to make something better. And the real shame of this is if we can't get together and do this together, it will fail. But if we can, it will succeed. And it won't be the marketer saying, I'm going to throw my minority budget into this thing so that I have the illusion of a marketplace. It'll be the marketer saying, I'm going to throw my budget into this thing because it works better, because it's performing better. And we do have that opportunity. We also have the opportunity to make a graph that is far bigger. Because we will have everybody. So I would say just an important thing to balance out. I wouldn't look at this as like the inferior third. This is an opportunity for everyone to get together and do something that's actually better that will be rewarded.
So before I get into maybe a couple of questions from the audience, I have one last from myself, which is, given that we want to not just be the inferior third, what do the next 12 months of the consortium look like? How are we going to do that? Is it about things we do in the consortium, or is it about things that businesses apply to the data that the consortium brings about so that they can leverage that fully enough to make their product more relevant than the other two?
Well, does anyone want to start, or?
Fire away.
I would say we are on the absolute correct path right now, which is step one, get this ID in every bid request. Get this ID everywhere. Step two, hopefully get every platform to adopt. Or if nothing else, listen to every objection and resolve it. I think we've done an incredible job of doing that in the last 10 months. Every negative thing that we've heard, we have found a way to engineer around. We're going to continue to do that. So there's no reason not to use this ID. And then it's going to be a question of contribution to creating this massive democratized graph. Everyone that has a sliver of identity, some small graph, an email address, a hash, and a device ID, whatever you've got, contribute it so that we can make this thing huge. And I think that journey will take us for years, but if everyone's committed, I think we can do it.
Yeah, I think we need to build a network effect adoption now, and we need to go fast. So really come join us, because the more the merrier.
So I have this iPad, and I'm supposed to get questions in it, but no one's saying anything. How about we do the normal hand-raising method? Does that work?
No.
No. All right.
One question? Somebody brave?
We have one.
There we go. I can't see there ever being a day when it would be closed. I think we certainly expect there to be early adopters and then follow-ons, and that'll probably continue forever. I do think the network effect comment's a good one, which is at some point, this will have so much inertia. You have to look at it like, how does programmatic work today? And going back to those little motes of ID graphs, if your sync rate right now is 50%, you stand this thing up, and let's say it's 80, 90, or 95%. At some point, that becomes a disadvantage to your business. I think when we get there, hopefully any of the holdouts adopt, but I don't think there'll ever be a closed date on people being able to participate.
I know I'm the moderator, but I'll comment on that too. The only thing that we need to be careful of is privacy. So any member needs to be privacy compliant, and that's something that we'll take very seriously, but that's really the only piece there that I'd say would limit that.
That's a good point.
I actually submitted through the app and must not have gone through. Is there a cost of participation? How is
Please.
I can take that one. So there's likely going to be a very nominal cost for ad tech platforms, effectively just to fund the governance of the consortium. And think of it as being absolutely irrelevant, a rounding error level of fee, but it hasn't been established yet, legal, that sort of thing. That's component number one. Component number two will likely play out with domains. So if you use adnexus.com, I'm speaking for Brian, but I'm assuming this is true, or if you use adserver.org, there will be no charge. That neutral third domain we're talking about, there is a chance, based on how things go, it will be part of an organization that might charge to use that domain. That might be the only additional one. However, it would be optional to use that domain. That would be up to the member.
Great. If there aren't any more questions, and maybe it's just I don't know how to use the app. I swear I clicked messages. If there aren't any more questions, we'll probably wrap up. Thanks, everyone.